Sometimes Rafiki in The Lion King is just a strange old man with a staff and mysterious phrases. But if you think about it, why does he appear at the most fateful moments in history? Why are his actions always accurate, timely, and lead to powerful changes? Perhaps Rafiki is not just a tribal shaman, but a guardian of balance and a spiritual navigator of the great circle of life. In the canon, Rafiki always stands on the border between two worlds. He does not participate in the power struggle, does not divide territory, does not build hierarchies. He is not concerned with material order, but with the balance of life itself. His image is surrounded by symbols. His staff with hanging fruit symbolizes the fertility and wisdom of nature, and his dwelling is not a palace or a lair, but a high, secluded place closer to the stars. Even his language, half fairy tale, half mysterious, emphasizes his detachment from the ordinary. His first appearance in the film is connected with the birth of Simba, the moment when a new chapter begins. And even then, Rafiki does not simply bless the baby. He carefully examines him, looking into him as if determining something more than strength or health. This is not the gaze of a doctor or a ruler, but of a guide capable of seeing spiritual potential. Rafiki seems to have always known that Simba would become a pivotal figure in the history of the Pride Lands. He accepted this knowledge calmly, without haste, without trying to change anything. His task is not to interfere in events, but to nudge the right soul toward the right decision at the right time. This detachment is especially noticeable in times of crisis. After Mufasa's tragic death, Rafiki does not rush to find Simba or organize a search. He waits patiently, knowing that the time must ripen. This is not indifference but a deep understanding. Premature intervention will destroy more than it will fix. Visually, his path also emphasizes his special status. Rafiki moves freely where other characters are stuck. Between the kingdom of pride and the forbidden lands, between the past and the present, and between reality and memories. He is like a bridge that cannot be crossed before its time. In this context, it becomes clear that Rafiki does not act on a whim or out of emotion. His mission is to maintain balance and ensure that the great circle continues to turn, even at the cost of pain and sacrifice. His intervention is always minimal, just enough to allow free will to play its role. But here, a paradox arises. Suppose Rafiki understood what Simba's return would lead to and knew it would be a path of trials, losses, and difficult decisions. Why did he still decide to intervene? Why didn't he let the young lion remain in carefree oblivion, where harmony seemed to reign? What made him break the distance at that very moment? If Rafiki had seen the events in advance, why wouldn't he have stopped Simba from making mistakes? Why did he allow suffering, escape, and loss of self? The answer to this question lies at the heart of the philosophy of the great circle of life, which permeates the entire story of Pride Lands. The great circle of life in The Lion King is not just a beautiful image of nature. It is a complex concept of balance based not on the power of authority, but on the interconnectedness of all beings. Mufasa explains to Simba that lions hunt antelopes. Still, when lions die, their bodies become part of the earth, from which grass grows and antelopes feed. There are no higher or lower beings. There is only interdependence. Life is sustained through a cycle, through a natural order. But there is a fine line here. Balance is only possible when every circle member consciously accepts their role, not through violence, fear, or free participation in a greater plan. Violent interference in someone else's destiny is a violation of balance, even if the goal seems noble. Rafiki could not simply grab Simba by the scruff of the neck and bring him back to the Pride Lands. That would have betrayed the very principle of the Great Circle. Moreover, it could have turned Simba into a puppet of fate, deprived of his own will and strength. A vital scene that emphasizes this idea is when Mufasa, after passing away, appears to Simba through his reflection in the water and the stars. He doesn't tell his son what to do. He just reminds him, "You forgot who you are." Mufasa doesn't give orders. He awakens Simba's inner strength. This deeply resonates with Rafiki's role. A mentor can show the way, but the student must walk it himself. That is why Rafiki does not simply tell Simba what to do. He asks questions, provokes, and guides, but does not drag. He respects the right to choose, even knowing where that choice will lead. This principle of spiritual non-interference makes Rafiki not just a wise elder, but a faithful guardian of free will in the Pride Lands. He understands that destiny is not a script written in advance. It is the intersection of possibilities, choices, and their The proper order is established not when everything goes according to plan, but when everyone consciously makes choices. But a new mystery arises. If free will is so important, why did Rafiki choose to intervene at the very moment when Simba was living peacefully, albeit on the run from his past? Why not earlier? Why not later? What changed then that made intervention acceptable? This question leads us to the next mystery. Why did Simba reach the point of no return at the moment of internal crisis? And how did Rafiki sense that the time had come? Free will is a great power. But even the freest soul needs a moment of awakening. The question is when that moment comes, and why for Simba it came when Rafiki arrived. After the tragedy, Simba lived for a long time in a strange calm. It seemed that he had found a new home, new friends, new happiness. No responsibilities, no past, no expectations. Hakuna Matata, the ideology of carefreeness, became his new philosophy. But in reality, it was not life but escape. Deep inside, a crack was growing at the very core of his being. A crack between who he was and who he pretended to be. Canon masterfully shows this through details. Simba matures physically but not spiritually. His body becomes stronger, but his gaze remains confused. His movements are confident in everyday life but full of inner heaviness in moments of loneliness. It is these contradictions that indicate that escape did not bring liberation. It has become a cage. The crisis has been brewing slowly. Every peaceful morning, every carefree song only intensified the inner emptiness. And when enough pain, enough doubt, enough longing for himself had accumulated, Simba's soul reached a point where external well-being could no longer drown out the inner call. That is when Rafiki arrives, not earlier, so as not to destroy the fragile illusion of escape that Simba was still clinging to. Not later, so as not to allow this illusion to completely destroy the spark within him. Precisely at the moment when the space for change matured within the young lion. This is a key principle of spiritual strategy. You cannot forcefully awaken the soul. You can only wait for it to approach the threshold beyond which a new awareness begins. And it is precisely this threshold that Rafiki has sensed. The image of his appearance is a separate sign. Rafiki does not intrude abruptly. He observes and adapts to Simba's rhythm. His strange actions, a game, absurdity, and symbol, reflect the hero's inner state. To reach the real Simba, Rafiki must first bypass his barriers, fear, guilt, and pride. The scene with the water surface shows the culmination of this spiritual work. Rafiki does not tell Simba, "You must return." He shows him his reflection. And only through him does Simba see himself. Only through his recognition does he understand that he is Mufasa's heir, not by blood, but by spirit. Rafiki creates the conditions in which Simba makes his own decision. And that is the whole point. The proper choice is born not from order but from an inner awakening. But at this point, a new question arises. Yes, Simba has awakened. Yes, he remembered who he was. But did he understand then what his decision would lead to? And if he did, was he ready for the fact that his return would not be a triumph, but a difficult test in which he would lose much more than he would gain? Did Rafiki know that Simba's return would mark the beginning of a new, much more difficult path? At first glance, Simba's return to the Pride Lands seems like a victory. It is as if the hero has realized his destiny, returned home, and regained what was lost. But looking deeper, we see that this return is not a triumph. It is a complex, almost bitter act of spiritual maturation, with little joy and much loss. When Simba sets foot on the land of his childhood again, he is met not with joyful anticipation, but with a picture of ruin. The Pride Lands are depleted, the kingdom is destroyed, and the great circle of life order is disrupted. This is not the place he dreamed of returning to. And it is definitely not the place where he was expected. Simba returns not as an heir, but as an outcast, as the one who, in the eyes of many, is to blame for what happened. From the beginning, it is clear that his journey home will be one of struggle, guilt, and responsibility, not glory. Rafiki knew this. He saw ahead. Simba's return would cost him everything easy and carefree in his former life. It would take away his right to be naive. It would forever deprive him of the peace he had found among his new friends. It would turn him into someone who had to bear the world's weight. The symbolism here is extremely eloquent. Sandstorms, parched earth, dull colors, visually the Pride Lands reflect the inner state of a world without a legitimate king. When he crosses the kingdom's borders, Simba seems to pass through a purifying fire. To restore order, he must sacrifice his past life. The battle with Scar is the culmination of this journey, but this is not an ordinary victory over an external enemy. It is a battle with himself, with fear, guilt, and weakness. The scene where Simba finally accepts his guilt for the past and realizes that his role is not to run away but to serve is a true victory. And Rafiki understood all this. He didn't just want to return Simba to the throne. He was preparing him for the hardest sacrifice of all, the loss of his own identity for the sake of restoring the great circle of life. Only when Simba was ready to sacrifice himself for others was his return possible. Simba's true maturity begins where his personal desires end, where the common good becomes more important than personal comfort. This is the essence of the spiritual mission that Rafiki helped him fulfill. But all this brings us to the last, most profound question. If Rafiki knew the price of return, if he understood that Simba's path would be full of pain and loss, If he realized this was not the end of the trials, but the beginning, why did he intervene anyway? Why did he think it was worth bringing Simba back to his destiny, even at the cost of sacrifice? Rafiki knew. He knew that Simba's path would be difficult. He knew that the return would require sacrifices, that there would be more pain than joy, and yet he intervened. Because proper care for the soul is not about protecting it from suffering. It is preparing them for it. It is understanding that pain is not the enemy, and trials are not punishments. They are part of the path to true maturity and freedom. In the grand design of the great circle of life, everyone plays their part not because they have to, but because they choose to. Freely, consciously. The mentor's task is not to keep the student safe, but to open the door for him in time, behind which his own path begins. Rafiki did not bring Simba back to spare him from trials, nor was it to restore the old order for the sake of the old kings. He brought him back because he understood that Simba was ready for the most important choice of his life, to accept his role in the circle of life despite his fear, guilt, and pain. This is the highest spiritual strategy, not to save, not to lead by the hand, not to choose for someone else, but to help them see that even the most challenging path is the path home. And when Simba, having overcome everything, ascends to Pride Rock to accept his destiny, he does not do it for glory, not for revenge, not even for himself. He does it for the greater balance that cannot be sustained by fear, pride, or flight. Rafiki watches him from the shadows. He no longer interferes. His role is over. The student has become part of the plan, and perhaps this is where the deepest truth lies. A true mentor is not someone who shows the way. A true mentor believes the student will find the way on their own. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Have a great day and see you soon.